Story 1. The Loop on Interstate 80. Marcus Chen had been driving trucks for 17 years, hauling freight across the American heartland with the kind of quiet confidence that only comes from logging over 2 million miles without incident. On the night of October 14th, 2019, he was running a straightforward route from Omaha to Des Moines along Interstate 80, a stretch of highway he'd driven hundreds of times before. The cargo was standard, pallets of agricultural equipment destined for a John Deere distribution center. His Kenworth W900 hummed steadily at 65 miles per hour as the flat Nebraska landscape stretched endlessly in every direction under a moonless sky. The digital clock on his dashboard read 2:47 a.m. when Marcus first noticed the mile marker, mile 442. He registered it absently, the way a driver notes landmarks without really thinking about them. The road was empty except for the occasional set of taillights in the distance, and his CB radio crackled with static and the intermittent chatter of other night haulers fighting boredom and fatigue. Marcus sipped his lukewarm coffee and adjusted his seat, settling in for another hour of driving before his scheduled rest stop at the Iowa 80 truck stop, the world's largest truck stop and a beacon for weary drivers. 15 minutes passed, maybe 20. Marcus wasn't timing it precisely, but when he glanced at the roadside again, he saw mile marker 442 slide past his window. He blinked hard, assuming fatigue was playing tricks on his perception. But the number was clear in his headlights, reflective and unmistakable. Mile 442. He checked his odometer. He definitely traveled distance. The needle had moved. His GPS showed him progressing along I-80 exactly as expected. Yet there was that mile marker again. Marcus keyed his CB radio. Any drivers eastbound on 80 near mile marker 442? This is rolling thunder. Anybody out there? Static answered him. He tried again, switching channels, but received only empty hiss in response. The stretch of highway remained absolutely deserted. No other vehicles in sight now, not even distant taillights. Just his truck, the road, and the darkness pressing in from all sides. He drove for another 30 minutes, watching his odometer tick away the miles, watching his GPS trace his route. But when he looked for the mile markers, they told a different story. Mile 442. Then several minutes later, mile 442 again. And again. Each time he passed it, Marcus felt something tighten in his chest. He increased his speed to 75, then 80, the Kenworth's engine roaring with the added strain. The white dashed lines of the road blurred beneath him. His GPS continued to show normal progress, but mile marker 442 kept appearing with the regularity of a metronome. Marcus pulled over onto the shoulder, his heart hammering against his ribs. He killed the engine and sat in sudden, oppressive silence. Outside, the darkness seemed absolute. No stars, no moon, just blackness beyond the reach of his headlights. He grabbed his flashlight and climbed down from the cab, his boots crunching on the gravel shoulder. The air felt wrong, too still, too thick, like breathing through wet cotton. He walked back along the shoulder to the mile marker, that green rectangular sign with its white numbers. Mile 442. He touched it, solid, real, cold metal under his fingertips. When he turned back toward his truck, he froze. There were two sets of taillights ahead. Both were Kenworth W900s. Both had his company's logo. Both had his license plate number. One was his truck where he'd parked it. The other was perhaps 200 yards ahead, also pulled onto the shoulder. Marcus's mouth went dry. He approached the second truck slowly, flashlight beam shaking slightly in his grip. As he got closer, he could see someone in the driver's seat, someone who looked exactly like him. The figure sat perfectly still, hands on the steering wheel, eyes staring straight ahead at nothing. Marcus stumbled backward, his rational mind trying and failing to process what he was seeing. He ran to his truck, the first one, and climbed inside, slamming the door and locking it. His hands trembled as he started the engine. He didn't look at the second truck as he pulled back onto the highway. He just drove, foot pressing the accelerator as far as he dared. The speedometer needle climbed past 85. 90. The truck shuddered with the speed. Mile marker 442 appeared in his headlights. Marcus screamed, a raw sound that tore from his throat. He kept driving, kept pushing. The mile marker appeared again and again. Each time his panic escalated. He tried taking an exit, but there were no exits. The road stretched perfectly straight, no off-ramps, no intersections, just endless asphalt disappearing into darkness. His GPS showed exits that didn't exist, showed towns that never appeared, showed a world that wasn't there. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time connected, unreliable. Marcus's fuel gauge dropped toward empty, which should have been impossible given his recent fill-up in Omaha. He passed his own truck on the shoulder 17 times. Sometimes the other Marcus sat in the driver's seat. Sometimes the cab was empty. Once the other Marcus was standing beside the truck watching him pass. Their eyes met. The other Marcus smiled, but it wasn't a human expression. The smile was too wide, stretched impossibly across a face that looked more like a mask than flesh. Marcus tried everything. He drove in reverse. He turned around. He stopped and waited. Nothing changed the pattern. Mile marker 442. Always mile marker 442. The CB radio eventually came back to life, but all it broadcast was his own voice from hours ago, asking if anyone was out there. The loop of audio played endlessly. Any drivers eastbound on 80 near mile marker 442. This is rolling thunder. Anybody out there? Over and over until the words lost all meaning. The fuel gauge hit empty. The engine sputtered. Marcus watched helplessly as his truck rolled to a stop on the shoulder. The sudden silence felt like a physical pressure. He sat in the dark cab, too terrified to move, too exhausted to think clearly. Outside, he could see other trucks now. Dozens of them stretching along the shoulder in both directions. All dark, all abandoned. All, he somehow knew, carrying drivers who had entered the loop and never escaped. His door opened by itself. Marcus tried to resist, but his body moved without his consent. He climbed down from the cab like a puppet on strings. His legs walked him along the shoulder toward mile marker 442. He tried to scream but produced no sound. Other drivers emerged from their trucks, all moving in the same mechanical way toward the same destination. They formed a line along the highway. Marcus could see his own face among them, repeated dozens of times. All the versions of himself he'd passed, all the Marcuses who had driven this loop before. At mile marker 442, a door opened in the air. Not a metaphor, an actual door, rectangular and edged with light that hurt to look at. Beyond it, Marcus glimpsed something vast and incomprehensible, a space that existed outside normal geometry. The line of drivers walked through, one by one. When Marcus's turn came, he crossed the threshold. The door closed behind him. The next morning, a state trooper found Marcus's Kenworth on the shoulder of Interstate 80 at mile marker 442. The engine was cold, the cab empty. Marcus Chen was never found. His truck's GPS data showed he'd driven in a perfect circle for 6 hours, covering no actual distance. The CB radio contained a recording of his voice, looping endlessly. The fuel tank was bone dry, though records showed he'd filled up in Omaha just hours before. His wife received his final paycheck. His company reassigned his routes. Within 2 weeks, another driver named Jennifer Rodriguez disappeared on the same stretch of highway. Her truck was found at mile marker 442. Then another driver, and another. Interstate 80 between Omaha and Des Moines quietly gained a reputation among truckers. The smart ones took alternate routes. The skeptical ones drove it anyway, confident in their experience and rationality. Some of them made it through. But every few months, another truck appears on the shoulder at mile marker 442, abandoned and empty. Another driver added to the loop that never ends. forever passing the same mile marker, forever searching for an exit that doesn't exist, forever trapped on the highway that goes nowhere at all. Story 2. The hitchhiker with no face. Dale Morrison had 3 simple rules for his 22 years of truck driving. Never skip vehicle inspections, never drive more than the legal hours, and never, under any circumstances, pick up hitchhikers. These rules had served him well through countless cross-country hauls in his navy blue Peterbilt 579, keeping him safe, legal, and alive. But on the humid night of August 3rd, 2021, as he drove through the dense pine forests of northern Georgia on Highway 441, Dale broke his 3rd rule for the first and last time. The figure appeared suddenly in his headlights around 11:30 p.m., thumb extended in the universal gesture of a hitchhiker. Dale's first instinct was to drive past. He'd done it hundreds of times before without guilt or hesitation, but something made him slow down. Maybe it was the isolated location, miles from the nearest town. Maybe it was the way the rain had started falling in heavy sheets, turning the highway into a river. Or maybe it was something else, something he couldn't name, a compulsion that felt like it came from outside his own mind. His foot moved to the brake. The Peterbilt hissed to a stop. The hitchhiker ran to the passenger door. Dale leaned over to open it, already regretting his decision. "Just to the next town," he called out. "That's all I can do." The figure climbed in, bringing a wave of cold air that seemed wrong for a summer night. Dale waited for a response, for a thank you or acknowledgement. None came. The hitchhiker sat perfectly still, dripping rainwater onto the seat. Dale tried to get a good look at his passenger, but the darkness and the angle made it difficult. The hitchhiker wore a dark hoodie, pulled up and forward, obscuring their face completely. "Name's Dale," he offered, pulling back onto the highway. The wipers beat a steady rhythm against the windshield, struggling against the downpour. "Where you headed?" Silence. Dale felt unease creep up his spine. He glanced at his passenger again. The hoodie still concealed their face, but something about the angle seemed off. The hood was pulled too far forward, creating a darkness where a face should be visible, as if the fabric extended into an impossible depth. "You okay there, friend?" Dale asked, trying to keep his voice casual. The hitchhiker's hand moved slowly, reaching up toward the hood. Dale watched from the corner of his eye, dividing his attention between the road and his passenger. The fingers looked pale, almost luminescent in the dim light from the dashboard. They gripped the edge of the hood. Dale's heart rate increased without knowing why. "You don't have to," he started to say, but the hitchhiker pulled back the hood. There was no face. Not a disfigured face or a masked face or a face hidden in shadow. Simply no face at all. Where features should have been, there was only smooth, blank skin stretched over the general shape of a head. No eyes, no nose, no mouth, just flesh-colored emptiness. Dale's hand spasmed on the steering wheel. The truck swerved. He overcorrected, his mind refusing to process what he was seeing. What the hell?" The words came out strangled. The thing beside him remained motionless. Dale's rational mind screamed that this was impossible, that he was hallucinating, that exhaustion or carbon monoxide or something chemical was making him see things that couldn't exist. But the faceless passenger sat there, undeniably real, radiating cold that made Dale's breath fog in the air. He fumbled for the CB radio with one hand, never taking his eyes off the road. He couldn't look at that blank face again, couldn't let his mind accept what it had seen. "This is Mountaineer, anybody on Channel 19, I need. His voice failed. What did he need? What could he say? That he'd picked up something inhuman, that a creature with no face was sitting in his cab. "There's something wrong," he finally managed. "On Highway 441 northbound, mile marker." He glanced at the marker he'd passed. "Mile marker 178. I need police." "I need," static erupted from the radio, so loud and sudden that Dale dropped the handset. The noise wasn't normal static. It contained sounds almost like voices, screaming or laughing or both at once. The faceless hitchhiker's head turned toward him. Without eyes, Dale somehow knew it was looking at him, watching him. The cab temperature continued to drop. Dale could see his breath now, thick white clouds with each exhalation. Frost began forming on the inside of the windows. His teeth chattered. He cranked the heat to maximum, but only cold air blasted from the vents. The thing beside him leaned closer. Dale pressed himself against the driver's door, one hand on the wheel, the other searching blindly for the door handle. He'd jump if he had to. At 60 miles per hour in pouring rain, he'd jump and take his chances. The hitchhiker's hand reached out, those pale fingers extending toward Dale's face. He jerked away, the truck swerving across the center line. An air horn blared. Another truck coming southbound, lights blinding, missing him by inches. Dale wrestled the Peterbilt back into his lane, heart hammering so hard he thought it might burst. The faceless thing's hand stopped moving, hovering in the air between them. Dale stared at those fingers. They were too long with too many joints, bending in ways human fingers shouldn't bend. "What do you want?" Dale's voice cracked. "What the hell do you want from me?" The hand remained suspended, patient and still. Dale's mind raced through possibilities. Throw the truck into park and run, swerve off the road. Grab the tire iron under his seat and fight. But deep down, he knew none of these options would work. This thing, whatever it was, had chosen his truck for a reason, had chosen him. The smooth, blank face began to change. At first, Dale thought it was a trick of the shadows, but no, the flesh was moving. Indentations appeared where eyes should be. A vertical slit opened where a mouth belonged. The thing was creating a face, molding its features like clay. But the face it formed wasn't its own. Dale watched in horror as the features resolved into something recognizable. It was his face. His eyes, his nose, his mouth, a perfect replica except for the expression. His face never looked like that, empty and predatory and utterly wrong. "Stop it," Dale whispered. "Stop it, stop it, stop it." The thing wearing his face tilted its head, mimicking his mannerisms. It smiled with his smile. That smile widened, stretching beyond human limits, showing too many teeth, teeth that were too sharp. The mouth. Dale expected words, but what emerged wasn't speech. It was a sound that bypassed his ears and resonated directly in his skull, a frequency that made his bones ache and his vision blur. The sound contained multitudes, screaming and crying and laughter and rage, every negative emotion compressed into a single sustained note. Dale screamed back, his own voice lost beneath the supernatural noise. Blood trickled from his nose, hot against his cold skin. His hands lost feeling, going numb on the steering wheel. The truck drifted. Through his blurred vision, Dale saw the road ahead disappearing, replaced by absolute darkness. Not the darkness of night, but the absence of light itself, a void that consumed everything. The truck was driving into nothing, the headlights swallowed by the black. The sound stopped abruptly. Dale gasped, sucking in air, tasting blood. His vision slowly cleared. The road was back, wet asphalt reflecting his headlights. Rain pattered against the windshield. Everything seemed normal. He looked at the passenger seat, empty. The hitchhiker was gone, no wet seat where it had been sitting, no lingering cold, just empty space. Dale pulled over onto the shoulder, his entire body shaking. He turned on every light in the cab, checked every mirror, searched every compartment. Nothing. No evidence that anyone had been there. He grabbed his phone with trembling hands and dialed 911. The call wouldn't connect. No signal, despite showing full bars. He drove to the next town, a tiny place called Tallulah Falls, and pulled into the first gas station he found. The fluorescent lights and mundane normalcy felt like salvation. Dale stumbled inside, wild-eyed and babbling to the teenage clerk about hitchhikers and faceless things. The clerk stared at him with undisguised concern and threatened to call the police. Dale welcomed it. But when the local sheriff arrived, Dale found he couldn't explain coherently. The words sounded insane even to his own ears. The sheriff checked his truck, found nothing, and suggested Dale get some sleep. Maybe see a doctor. People sometimes hallucinated during long hauls, especially at night. Carbon monoxide leaks could cause it. Dale nodded numbly and agreed, though he knew what he'd seen was real. The sheriff left. Dale bought coffee and sat in his truck in the parking lot until dawn, too terrified to drive, too terrified to close his eyes. When the sun rose, he started the engine and drove home to Tennessee, breaking his route contract. He turned in his resignation the next day. 22 years of professional driving ended in a one-paragraph citing health reasons. His company tried to change his mind. Dale had a spotless record, but he refused. He sold his Peterbilt at a loss and took a job at a local hardware store, something that kept him off the highways. But the hitchhiker never truly left. Dale sees it sometimes, standing by the side of roads he drives on his way to work, always in his peripheral vision, always wearing that dark hoodie. When he looks directly, it's gone. And once, 3 months after that night in Georgia, Dale woke at 3 a.m. to find a figure standing at the foot of his bed. The figure pulled back its hood to reveal no face at all, just that terrible smooth blankness. Then it smiled with his smile, showing those 2 sharp teeth. Dale blinked and it vanished. He doesn't sleep well anymore, doesn't drive at night, never goes near Highway 441, and he's added a 4th rule to his list. Some hitchhikers aren't looking for rides. They're looking for something else entirely, something you can never give back once they've taken it. Dale doesn't know what the faceless thing took from him that night, but he knows something is missing, some piece of himself that can never be recovered. He sees it sometimes in the mirror, his own face looking back at him, but slightly wrong, as if someone else is wearing it, someone with too many teeth and too much darkness behind the eyes. Story 3. The truck stop that wasn't there. Elena Rodriguez navigated her crimson Freightliner Cascadia through the pre-dawn darkness of rural Montana on February 11th, 2020, hauling a full load of frozen foods from Billings to Great Falls along Interstate 15. The monotonous white lines and sprawling emptiness of Big Sky country had become her familiar companion during her 9 years of long-haul trucking. But that morning, as her fuel gauge dipped toward the quarter-tank mark and her bladder reached uncomfortable fullness, Elena realized with growing concern that she'd miscalculated the distance between truck stops. Her GPS showed nothing but empty highway for another 73 miles, and the early hour meant most small-town gas stations along the state roads would still be closed. Then, like an answer to a prayer, she saw the lights. A full truck stop complex blazed against the darkness on her right, perhaps half a mile ahead. Elena felt relief wash over her. The facility looked substantial. She could make out multiple fuel islands, a large convenience store, even what appeared to be a restaurant attached to the main building. Strange that it didn't show on her GPS, but reception was spotty in this region, and her mapping data was a few months old. Rural truck stops opened and closed with some regularity. She activated her turn signal and began slowing down. The exit ramp appeared exactly where it should be, though Elena couldn't recall seeing advance warning signs. No matter. She guided the Cascadia off the interstate and down the ramp, her headlights sweeping across the truck stop as she approached. The place seemed oddly deserted for its size. The fuel island stood empty despite the inviting glow of overhead lights. The parking lot contained only 5 or 6 other semis, all dark, presumably with drivers sleeping in their cabs. The convenience store windows blazed with fluorescent brightness, but Elena couldn't see anyone moving inside. She pulled up to the nearest fuel pump and shut off her engine. The sudden silence felt heavy, oppressive. Elena sat for a moment, taking in the scene. Something felt off, though she couldn't pinpoint exactly what triggered her unease. The truck stop looked perfectly normal, a standard layout, common corporate design, nothing unusual. Yet her instincts, honed by thousands of nights at countless truck stops across America, whispered warnings. She almost restarted the engine and left. Almost. But the need for fuel was real, and the next confirmed truck stop was over an hour away. Alina climbed down from her cab, her boots hitting the pavement with a solid thud. The cold Montana air bit at her exposed skin. She swiped her fuel card at the pump. The reader's screen flickered, displayed garbled characters she didn't recognize, then accepted the card with a cheerful beep. The pump activated. Alina lifted the diesel nozzle and began filling her tank, watching the numbers tick upward on the display. The smell of diesel fuel mixed with something else, something faintly chemical and unpleasant that she couldn't identify. While the tank filled, Alina studied the other trucks in the lot. They were wrong somehow, though it took her a moment to understand why. The trucks themselves looked normal enough, a Kenworth, a couple of Peterbilts, a Volvo, and International, but they all appeared identical in their stillness. No idle vibrations, no exhaust vapor in the cold air, no lights in the cabs. They sat like museum displays or movie props, perfect and lifeless. Alina felt the unease intensify. She glanced toward the convenience store, thinking she'd grab a coffee and maybe talk to the attendant, get a read on the place from another person. The fuel pump clicked off. Alina replaced the nozzle and receipt. The printed paper felt wrong, too smooth, too waxy, and the printed text looked smeared, as if it had been exposed to water. She folded it and walked toward the store, her footsteps echoing strangely in the empty lot. Motion sensor doors slid open with a hydraulic hiss. Warm air washed over her as she stepped inside. The convenience store looked exactly like 10,000 other convenience stores. Aisles of chips and candy, refrigerated cases of drinks, a hot food section with rolling hot dogs and pizza under heat lamps, a coffee station against the far wall. Everything was perfectly stocked, perfectly clean, and perfectly empty. No attendant behind the counter, no other customers browsing the aisles. Alina called out, "Hello, anyone working?" Her voice sounded flat, absorbed by the space without proper echo. She walked to the coffee station and poured herself a large cup, her movements automatic from thousands of similar truck stop visits. The coffee looked normal, smelled normal. She added cream and sugar, snapped on a lid. A handwritten sign taped to the counter read, "Honor System $2. Alina walked to the front register and placed $2 bills beside the dusty register. She waited for a moment, expecting an attendant to emerge from a back room. No one came. Alina turned to leave, then noticed the newspapers displayed in a rack near the door. She stopped, frowning. The front page was visible, the Great Falls Tribune, but the date was wrong. February 11th, 1987. Exactly 33 years ago to the day. Alina pulled the paper from the rack. The pages felt brittle, yellowed. This wasn't a reproduction or anniversary edition. It was an actual newspaper from 1987, yet it looked nearly pristine, as if it had been printed yesterday. She dropped the paper and backed away, her unease crystallizing into genuine fear. She needed to leave. Now, Alina pushed through the doors and hurried toward her truck. That's when she noticed the sky. Dawn should have been approaching. She'd been driving for hours, and first light had been imminent when she pulled off the interstate. But the darkness remained absolute. No lightning on the eastern horizon. No stars visible overhead. Just black, as if the sky itself had been replaced with something else. Alina's hands shook as she climbed into her cab and started the engine. The Cascadia roared to life, the familiar sound providing small comfort. She put the truck in gear and drove toward the exit ramp, back to the interstate. The truck stop's lights receded in her mirrors. She couldn't wait to get back to the highway, back to normalcy. The exit ramp curved upward. Alina followed it, expecting to merge onto I-15. Instead, the ramp deposited her directly back into the truck stop parking lot. She was facing the convenience store again, her truck in almost the exact same position as when she'd first pulled in. Alina's breath caught. She stared at the impossible loop. 2 hours, 2 minutes, 2 seconds. 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 2 hours, 2 minutes This wasn't right. Roads didn't work like this. Geometry didn't work like this. She tried again, driving more slowly this time, watching carefully. The exit ramp curved up and away from the truck stop. She could see the interstate overpass ahead. But as she drove onto what should have been I-15, the road twisted somehow, space folding in a way that made her eyes hurt, and she found herself entering the truck stop parking lot again from a different angle. Alina felt panic rising in her chest like cold water. She grabbed her CB radio. "This is Alina Rodriguez. Anybody receiving? I'm at a truck stop on I-15 in Montana, mile marker." She realized she didn't know the mile marker, hadn't seen one. "I need help. Something's wrong here. Something's really wrong." Static answered her. Then slowly a voice emerged from the white noise. It sounded distant, distorted, but unmistakably human. "You can't leave," the voice said simply. "None of us can leave." Alina dropped the handset as if it had burned her. She looked at the other trucks in the lot with new understanding. Those dark cabs weren't empty because the drivers were sleeping. They were empty because the drivers were gone. Or worse, they were still here somewhere, trapped just like she was becoming trapped. Alina tried every exit, every route away from the truck stop. Each attempt ended the same way. The road doubled back, space twisted, and she found herself in the parking lot again. She drove for what felt like hours, though the clock on her dashboard seemed stuck, the digits frozen. The darkness never lifted. No other vehicles appeared. The truck stop remained brightly lit, eternally inviting, eternally empty. Eventually, exhausted and terrified, Alina parked her truck and shut off the engine. She sat in silence, trying to think rationally. There had to be an explanation, a logical reason. Maybe she was having a mental breakdown. Maybe carbon monoxide poisoning. Maybe she'd fallen asleep at the wheel and this was all a dream, a nightmare from which she'd wake up. She pinched herself, slapped her own face. The pain felt real. She decided to explore the facility more thoroughly, looking for clues or answers or another human being. Alina walked through the convenience store again, examining every detail. Corner behind a display of motor oil, she found a door marked "Employees Only." She pushed it open. The room beyond was small and windowless, lit by a single bare bulb. A metal desk sat against one wall, covered with papers. Alina shuffled through them, finding documents that made no sense, shipping manifests dated from various years spanning decades, repair invoices for equipment that didn't exist, employee schedules listing names she didn't recognize. Then she found the logbook, a thick leather-bound journal filled with handwritten entries. Alina opened it to a random page and read, "Day 47, still here, still can't leave. The truck stop provides everything we need except freedom, food that never spoils, fuel that never runs out, but no exit, no escape. I've stopped trying. Margaret." Alina flipped through the pages. Dozens of entries from different people, all telling similar stories. Truckers who stopped for fuel or food or rest, who found themselves unable to leave, who slowly realized they'd entered some kind of trap or pocket dimension or hell. The most recent entry was dated February 10th, 2020, yesterday. "If you're reading this, you're trapped like the rest of us." The truck stop appears to drivers at night when they're low on fuel or desperate for rest. It offers exactly what they need. But once you stop, you can't leave. "I don't know what this place is or who created it. I've been here for 6 days. My food is running low. The convenience store has food, but something tells me I shouldn't eat it. The coffee you drank, I wouldn't have done that. Robert." Alina dropped the logbook, the coffee. She de-drunk the coffee. She felt suddenly nauseous, imagining some kind of poison or drug working through her system. But she felt physically normal, no different than before. What had the coffee done? Bound her to this place somehow, sealed her fate. She ran from the back room, through the store, out to her truck. She had to try again, had to find a way out. She drove with manic intensity, trying every possible route, every combination of turns and directions. The truck stop's geography seemed to shift subtly each time, adding to her disorientation. Once, she thought she found a dirt road leading away into darkness. She followed it for 10 minutes, hope building, only to have it loop back to the parking lot. Another time, she deliberately drove her truck through what appeared to be an empty field, hoping to bypass the roads entirely. The Cascadia's suspension groaned as it crossed rough terrain, but the field somehow curved back to the pavement, back to the truck stop. Dawn never came. Alina showed 5:47 a.m., but the time never advanced. She checked her fuel gauge, still 3/4 full, even after hours of driving. The tank should have been nearly empty. The truck stop's fuel had filled her tank with something that didn't deplete, trapping her with the means to drive endlessly but nowhere to go. After what felt like days but measured as mere hours on her frozen clock, Alina gave up. She parked her Cascadia next to the other dead trucks, shut off the engine one final time, and sat in the darkness of her cab. She thought about her family, her husband Carlos, her 2 daughters, her mother. They'd wonder what happened to her. Their DB searches, investigations. Her truck had GPS tracking through the company. They'd look at the data and see, what? That she'd exited I-15 at a location where no exit existed. That she'd vanished between mile markers. Alina climbed down from her truck and walked back into the convenience store. She found the logbook in the back room and added her own entry. February 11th, 2020. Day 1. My name is Alina Rodriguez. I'm a truck driver from El Paso. I stopped here thinking it was a normal truck stop. I was wrong. I drank the coffee. I tried to leave. I can't. If anyone finds this, tell my family I love them. Tell them I didn't abandon them. Tell them I'm sorry. Alina. She closed the journal and left it on the desk for the next person. Because Alina understood now that there would be a next person. The truck stop would keep appearing to desperate drivers, offering salvation, delivering imprisonment. She was part of it now, part of the trap. As she walked back through the store, Alina noticed for the first time that her reflection in the security mirrors looked slightly off. Her image moved a fraction of a second too slow, as if the mirror was showing her past rather than her present. Alina sat in a plastic chair near the coffee station and waited. For what she didn't know. For rescue that wouldn't come. For mourning that wouldn't break. For an explanation that didn't exist. The truck stop hummed around her, its lights burning forever, its empty aisles perfectly preserved, a beautiful cage with invisible bars. Outside, her Cascadia sat among the other trucks, one more vehicle in the collection, one more driver added to the place that appears and disappears along Interstate 15. The truck stop that exists and doesn't exist, that saves and destroys, that welcomes all travelers but releases none. And somewhere out there in the Montana darkness, another driver was running low on fuel. Another set of headlights was searching for sand. And the truck stop's lights were beginning to glow for them, bright and inviting and absolutely inescapable. Story 4. The Voice on Channel 19. William Bill Patterson had hauled freight across North America for 31 years, his weathered Mack anthem a familiar sight on countless highways from Vancouver to Monterey. On the frigid night of January 22nd, 2018, he was running a delayed load of electronics from Minneapolis to Winnipeg, fighting through a late-season blizzard that had reduced visibility to nearly zero. The Canadian border crossing had taken an extra 2 hours due to weather-related backups, and now Bill found himself on Highway 75 in southern Manitoba, driving through conditions that tested even his decades of experience. Snow swirled hypnotically in his headlights, and the road had become a treacherous ribbon of ice barely distinguishable from the ditches on either side. The CB radio had been quiet for hours. Most smart drivers had pulled over to wait out the storm. Bill probably should have done the same, but he was already behind schedule, and the company was breathing down his neck about delivery times. At 63 years old, Bill was contemplating retirement, and he didn't want his final years of driving marred by complaints about reliability. So he pushed forward at 30 miles per hour, hands gripping the wheel with the constant tension required by the hazardous conditions, his aging back aching from the sustained focus. At 11:43 p.m., the CB radio crackled to life. Bill welcomed the distraction. Northbound on 75, this is Big Bill. Anybody out there crazy enough to be driving through this mess? A moment of static, then a voice responded. It was male, young-sounding, with a slight accent Bill couldn't quite place. "Hey there, Big Bill, this is Jason. I'm out here too, about 10 miles south of Winnipeg. This weather's brutal, isn't it?" Bill felt immediate relief. Knowing another driver was nearby, even just a voice on the radio, made the lonely highway feel less oppressive. "Tell me about it, Jason. Been driving since before you were born, probably, and this is top 10 worst storms I've seen. You hauling freight or running empty?" "Freight," Jason's voice came back. "Full load, electronics, Minneapolis to Winnipeg." "You," Bill frowned. That's exactly what I'm hauling, same route, hell of a coincidence." A pause on the other end, longer than normal radio etiquette would allow. Then Jason laughed, though it sounded forced. "Small world, right? Same company. Trans-North Logistics." "You." Another pause. "Yeah, same." Bill's frown deepened. "What were the odds? Same company, same cargo, same route, same night." "You running solo or team?" Bill asked. "Solo, it's just me out here." Jason's voice had changed subtly. The friendly tone had developed an edge, something Bill couldn't quite identify. Nervousness, fear. "Listen, Bill, I need to ask you something. Have you noticed anything weird tonight? Anything off?" Bill's instincts prickled. "Off how? Besides the apocalyptic blizzard, you mean?" Static burst through the speaker, loud enough to make Bill wince. When Jason's voice returned, it sounded more distant, as if he was speaking from farther away from his CB handset. "The mile markers, Bill. Have you been watching the mile markers?" "Can't say I have," Bill admitted. "Can barely see 10 feet ahead, let alone read signs." "Why?" "I've been watching them," Jason said. "I've passed mile marker 94 3 times in the last hour, Bill. 3 times, same marker over and over. I thought I was going in circles, but my compass says I'm heading north. GPS is useless, keeps resetting, but I keep seeing that marker. Number 94, and Bill, I just passed it again." A cold feeling spread through Bill's gut that had nothing to do with the storm. "Jason, where exactly are you? What do you see around you?" "Nothing, just white. Snow everywhere, empty highway, no other traffic, haven't seen another vehicle in hours except..." The voice trailed off. "Except what?" Bill prompted. "There's a truck ahead of me, been in front of me for maybe 20 minutes now. Can't really see it clearly through the snow, just the tail lights. Red tail lights kind of floating in all this white. I've been following them, figuring another driver knows the road better than me. But Bill, the truck isn't leaving any tracks. I can see the road behind it in my headlights when the snow clears for a second and there are no tire tracks. Like it's not really there. Like it's a ghost." Bill's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "Jason, listen to me. Pull over right now. Stop following those lights. Find a safe spot and pull over until this storm passes." "I can't." Jason's voice was rising, panic creeping in. "I tried, Bill. I tried to stop, but my truck won't respond. The wheel turns, but nothing happens. The brakes feel spongy, like there's no pressure. I'm just following these lights and I can't stop, and I keep passing mile marker 94 and static swallowed the rest." Jason, you there?" Bill grabbed his own CB handset so hard his knuckles went white. "Jason, respond," more static than a faint voice barely audible beneath the interference. Bill, I can see into the truck ahead of me now. The snow and I can see through the back window into the cab. There's someone driving. I can see the back of his head. He's wearing the voice caught. "He's wearing a gray cap. Gray cap with a red logo. Bill, what color is your cap?" Bill's breath stopped. His hand moved slowly, trembling to touch the bill of his cap. Gray, with a red Trans-North Logistics logo. "Jason, what the hell kind of game is this?" But even as he said it, Bill knew it wasn't a game. His mirrors, he needed to check his mirrors. Bill's eyes moved to his side mirror, expecting to see only empty highway and swirling snow. Instead, he saw headlights, close. maybe 50 feet behind him, a truck following him through the blizzard. How long had it been there? "Jason, is that you behind me?" Bill's voice came out as a rasp. "Are you the one following me?" "I'm following the truck with the red taillights, Bill. The one with no tire tracks, the one with the driver in the gray cap." Jason's voice was barely holding together. "Bill, I think I'm following you. But that can't be right, can it? Because if I'm following you, then who's in the truck you're looking at in your mirror? Who's following you?" Bill's eyes snapped to his rearview mirror. The headlights were still there, steady and unwavering despite the violent wind and snow. For a moment, a gust cleared the air between the trucks, and Bill saw the vehicle behind him clearly. A Mack Anthem, same model as his, same color, same company logo on the door, same Canadian license plate number, though he only caught a glimpse before the snow closed in again. "This isn't possible," Bill whispered. "This isn't real." But his truck kept moving forward and the headlights kept following behind, and somewhere in the storm, Jason's voice kept transmitting on Channel 19. "Bill, I need to know something. What year is it? What's today's date?" "What? Why would you? It's January 22nd, 2018. "What the hell kind of question is that?" Silence. Then, soft and broken, "Bill, it's January 22nd, 2019 for me. Exactly 1 year ahead. I'm calling you from a year in the future." "And Bill, I need to tell you something. I need to warn you about what happens tonight." "Stop it," Bill said. "Just stop. This is some kind of sick prank, some bored trucker screwing with people on the CB. I'm changing channels." But he didn't change channels. His hand hovered over the dial but wouldn't turn it. He needed to hear. "Jason, if this isn't a prank, if you're really calling from 2019, then tell me something that proves it. Tell me something you couldn't know." "In your wallet," Jason said immediately, "you have a photo of your granddaughter. Her name is Emily. She turned 7 last month. The photo was taken at her party. She's wearing a purple dress with yellow flowers. You also have a receipt from a truck stop in Grand Forks from yesterday morning. $73.42, coffee and fuel. And Bill, you have a prescription bottle in your glove compartment. Blood pressure medication. You haven't told your family about the blood pressure issues. You're worried it might affect your medical certification." Bill's hand moved to his chest, feeling his heart hammering beneath his coat. "Nobody knew those things. Nobody. How do you know that?" "Because I am you, Bill." Jason's voice was crying now. "I'm William Patterson. I'm you 1 year from now. I'm driving this same route in this same storm, and I've been trying to reach you on the CB for hours. I'm trapped in some kind of loop, following you, following myself, and I can't break free. And Bill, you need to listen very carefully. You need to do exactly what I say. Because in 10 minutes, if things happen the way they happen to me, you're going to see something in the road ahead. You're going to think it's a person. You're going to swerve to avoid it. And," Bill could barely form words, "don't swerve, it's not real. There's nothing there. But when you swerve, your truck is going to slide on the ice and you're going to go into the ditch. The impact isn't bad, but you'll hit your head on the side window, just a little cut, some dizziness. You'll use your CB to call for help, and someone will answer. Someone will say they're coming to help you. Their name is Jason." Bill's world tilted. No, that can't. The guy who says he'll help never comes, Bill. You wait for hours. The storm gets worse. Your truck won't start again. The heater dies. You're stuck in a ditch in a blizzard in Manitoba, and nobody real is coming to help. You eventually make another CB call trying to reach anyone, and that's when you reach yourself. Yourself from a year earlier, driving the same route in the same storm. You try to warn him. You try to break the cycle, but it doesn't work. It never works. Because here I am, a year later, still stuck, still following myself, still trying to warn you not to swerve. The headlights in Bill's rearview mirror flashed twice. A signal, his own signal for communication between truckers. Bill was signaling himself. "How do I stop it?" Bill's voice shook. "How do I break out of this?" "I don't know." Jason's voice was anguished. "I've tried everything. I've tried taking different routes, but I always end up on Highway 75. I've tried stopping before the storm, but something always happens to delay me until I'm driving in it." I've tried not using the CB, but then I hear myself calling out, asking if anyone's there, and I can't help but respond. It's like the loop is fixed, like this night is stuck on repeat, caught in it. Bill's mind raced. What if I stop right now? What if I just stop the truck right here, wait out the storm? You can try, Jason said, but there was no hope in his voice. I tried that too on one of the loops, but you'll see something, Bill, something in the snow. Something that makes you start driving again. Or another truck will come up behind you and you'll need to move. Or the storm will get so bad that staying put becomes more dangerous than driving. Something always forces you forward to the moment where you swerve. Bill checked the time. 11:52 p.m. 9 minutes had passed since Jason first made contact. In 1 minute, if Jason was telling the truth, Bill would see something in the road, would swerve, would start the cycle that would trap him for a year or longer in an endless loop of trying to warn himself. Tell me about the figure, Bill demanded. The thing in the road, what does it look like? Like a person, Jason said. Standing in the middle of the highway, just standing there, impossible to see clearly through the snow, but definitely a human shape. You'll think someone's broken down, needs help. Your instinct will be to avoid them. Don't. Drive straight. Don't turn the wheel. Don't touch the brakes harder than you already are. Just drive through it. Drive through a person. Bill felt sick. Bill, there is no person, I know that now. I've been through this loop dozens of times, maybe hundreds. The figure isn't real, it's part of the loop. Part of whatever this is, a test maybe, a trap, I don't know, but if you swerve, you lose, you become me. You spend a year trapped, following yourself, trying to warn yourself, failing over and over. Bill's eyes were locked on the road ahead, straining to see through the blizzard. His clock showed 11:53 p.m., any second now. What happens if I drive straight? What happens if I don't swerve? I don't know, Jason admitted. I've never been able to warn myself in time. You're the first version of me who's listened this long. Maybe you'll just drive past. Maybe you'll reach Winnipeg. Maybe you'll deliver your load and go home to your family, and none of this will ever happen to you. And what happens to you? Bill asked. If I break the loop, what happens to the version of me that's already trapped? Silence. Then quietly, I don't know that either. Maybe I disappear. Maybe I finally get to move forward. Maybe I stay stuck forever. Bill, I don't care anymore. I'm so tired. I've been driving in this storm for a year, following myself, watching myself make the same mistake over and over. If you can break free, do it. Don't think about me. Just survive. 11:54 p.m. Bill's headlights cut through the swirling white, and then he saw it, a figure, standing motionless in the center of the highway, perhaps 100 feet ahead. Tall, human shape, but details impossible to make out. Just a dark silhouette against the snow. Every instinct Bill had developed over 31 years of driving screamed at him to turn the wheel, to avoid the obstacle, to save the person. It's there, Bill said into the handset. Jason, I see it. I see the figure. Drive straight, Jason's voice was urgent. Don't swerve, don't slow down more than you already are. Drive straight through it, please, Bill, please. Bill's hands were welded to the steering wheel. The figure was getting closer, 75 feet, 50 feet. He could almost convince himself he saw details, a coat, maybe a raised hand, someone needing help, someone who would die if Bill didn't swerve. 25 feet. Bill closed his eyes and kept the wheel straight. Truck passed through the space where the figure had been. No impact, no sound, nothing. Bill opened his eyes and checked his mirrors. Empty road behind him, no figure, no body, nothing but swirling snow and the headlights that had been following him. The headlights that were still there, still steady, still matching his speed exactly. Jason, Bill called into the CB. Jason, I did it. I drove straight. Nothing happened. I'm still on the road, still heading north. Jason, static. Bill tried again. Jason. Are you there? Did it work? More static, then faintly breaking up as if the signal was fading. Bill, something's happening. The road it's changing. I can see daylight ahead. Bill, there's daylight. The storm is clearing. The signal dissolved into static and was gone. Bill drove in silence for the next hour. the blizzard gradually diminishing until he emerged into clear conditions under a star-filled sky. Winnipeg's lights appeared on the horizon. Bill delivered his load, completed his paperwork, and drove home to Minneapolis in a daze. He told no one about the voice on Channel 19, about the warning from his future self, about the figure in the road that wasn't there. But Bill never drove Highway 75 in winter again. He took early retirement 6 months later, citing health concerns. The blood pressure medication wasn't working as well as it should. The stress of long-haul trucking was taking its toll. His company threw him a retirement party. His family was relieved. They'd worried about him for years. Bill settled into a quiet life, spent time with his granddaughter Emily, tried not to think about that night in January. He mostly succeeded, except on stormy nights when the wind howled and snow piled up against his windows. On those nights, Bill would lie awake and think about Jason, about the version of himself a year trapped in a loop. Had that Bill escaped? Had driving straight broken the cycle? Or was there still a truck out there on Highway 75, following itself through an endless blizzard, a driver trapped in his own timeline, trying desperately to warn himself, speaking into a CB radio that might or might not reach anyone? Bill never bought another CB radio, never wanted to find out. Because late at night, when the wind was right and the static of a distant storm filled the air, Bill sometimes thought he could hear it, a voice on Channel 19, asking if anyone was out there, asking for help, asking about mile marker 94, a voice that sounded exactly like his own. Story 5. The Empty Sleeper Cab. Thomas Brennan partnered with his younger brother Kevin for 6 profitable years, running team drives across the western United States in a well-maintained Volvo VNL 760 with a spacious sleeper cab. The arrangement worked perfectly. While one brother drove, the other slept, allowing them to cover maximum distance without violating hours of service regulations. They'd hauled everything from produce to furniture, building a reputation for reliability and fast turnaround times. On the evening of September 8, 2017, they picked up a load of textiles in Los Angeles, bound for Salt Lake City via Interstate 15, running through Nevada's desolate stretches. It was supposed to be a routine haul, the kind they'd completed hundreds of times. Thomas took the first driving shift while Kevin climbed into the sleeper cab to rest. They departed Los Angeles just after 8:00 p.m., the city's sprawl gradually giving way to darker, emptier terrain as they pushed northeast into the Mojave Desert. Thomas kept the radio low, playing classic rock stations when signals were available, letting static fill the cab when they faded. Behind him, separated by a curtain, Kevin's sleeper cab provided the minimal privacy afforded to team drivers. Thomas heard the familiar sounds of his brother settling in rustling blankets, the creak of the mattress, a brief cough, then silence as Kevin presumably fell asleep. The desert night was clear and moonless, the highway cutting through absolute blackness broken only by Thomas's headlights. Hours passed in the meditative monotony that long-haul drivers knew well. Thomas sipped coffee from his thermos, occasionally adjusting the climate control, his eyes tracking the white that disappeared endlessly beneath the truck. Around midnight, as they approached the Nevada state line, Thomas called back to the sleeper cab. "Kevin, you awake? Want to grab something at the next truck stop?" No response. Thomas smiled. Kevin could sleep through anything. He'd wake his brother in another hour when it was time to switch drivers. Thomas continued through the night, passing the occasional vehicle, watching distant lights of small towns flicker in the vast darkness. The Nevada desert had always felt otherworldly to Thomas, especially at night, too big, too empty, too indifferent to human presence. At 1:30 a.m., Thomas decided it was time to switch. He pulled into a rest area, one of those minimal facilities with just parking and bathrooms, no services. Thomas engaged the parking brake and shut off the engine. The sudden silence felt absolute. "Kevin, wake up, brother, your turn." Thomas pulled back the curtain separating the cab from the sleeper area. The sleeper was empty. Thomas stared at the vacant bunk, his tired mind struggling to process what he was seeing. The blankets were rumpled, suggesting someone had been lying there. Kevin's duffel bag sat in the corner where he'd tossed it. His phone charger was plugged into the outlet, but Kevin himself was gone. Thomas climbed into the sleeper area, checking with his hands as if Kevin might somehow be invisible. Nothing. Empty. Impossible. Thomas's heart rate increased. He checked the entire cab, the floor, the storage compartments, everywhere large enough for a human being. Nothing. He exited the truck and circled it, checking underneath with his flashlight, opening the trailer doors to peer into the cargo area, even though that made no sense. Kevin was not there. Thomas stood in the harsh fluorescent lights of the rest area, breathing hard, trying to think rationally. Kevin must have woken up and gotten out while Thomas was driving. That was the only explanation. But Thomas had been sitting in the driver's seat the entire time. The sleeper cab's door opened directly into the main cab. Kevin couldn't have exited without Thomas seeing him. Unless Thomas had been so focused on driving, so zoned out in that highway hypnosis that affected tired drivers, that he'd simply not noticed Kevin climbing over the passenger seat and opening the door. But that seemed impossible. The truck had been moving at 70 miles per hour. Opening the door at that speed would have caused a massive rush of air, would have triggered warning chimes. Thomas pulled out his phone and called Kevin's number. From inside the sleeper cab, he heard ringing. Kevin's phone was still there, sitting on the where it must have fallen from his pocket. Thomas ended the call and stood in the empty sleeper area, holding his brother's phone, trying to understand. When had he last heard Kevin? When they'd departed Lowe's Angels? The settling sounds, the cough. That had been 5.5 hours ago. Thomas checked the rest area, calling Kevin's name, searching the bathrooms and the sparse grassy areas. Empty. A single other truck was parked in the lot, its driver presumably sleeping in the cab. Thomas approached and knocked on the door. After a moment, a sleepy, annoyed driver cracked the door open. "What?" "I'm looking for my brother," Thomas said quickly. About 6 feet tall, brown hair, probably wearing a gray t-shirt. "Have you seen anyone walking around?" Driver stared at him with bleary incomprehension. "Man, I've been asleep for 2 hours. Haven't seen anybody. You lose your partner." "Something like that," Thomas muttered. The driver shrugged and closed his door. Thomas walked back to his own truck, his mind racing through possibilities, each one more troubling than the last. Kevin had somehow exited the truck during the drive. Kevin had never been in the truck. Kevin was hiding as a prank. Kevin had experienced some kind of medical emergency and what? Vanished. Thomas climbed back into the cab and sat in the driver's seat, staring at the curtain leading to the sleeper area. He needed to think this through logically. He needed to call someone, his parents, the police, the company, but what would he say? That his brother had disappeared from a locked sleeper cab during a highway drive. They'd think he was drunk or high or insane. Maybe he was. Maybe the desert isolation had finally cracked something in his mind. Thomas pulled out the sleeper cab's blankets, checking them for. He didn't know what. Evidence, clues, something that would explain the unexplainable. The blankets looked normal, though perhaps slightly damp with sweat. Kevin's duffel bag contained clothes, toiletries, a paperback novel, snacks. Normal items belonging to a normal person who should be present but wasn't. Thomas sat on the bunk where Kevin should have been sleeping and tried to reconstruct the past hours in exact detail. Lowe's Angels. Loading the cargo, Kevin complaining about the late start but otherwise in normal spirits. The drive beginning. Kevin climbing into the sleeper, the sounds of settling, the cough, then silence, hours of driving, then the empty bunk. Was there a moment Thomas had forgotten, a truck stop where Kevin might have gotten out? No, Thomas had driven straight through without stopping. He was certain, relatively certain. His exhaustion made him doubt his own memories. Thomas decided to check the truck's logging device and GPS records. Modern trucks tracked everything: location, speed, stops, driving hours. The data would show if they'd stopped somewhere and Thomas had somehow forgotten. He accessed the system through the dashboard computer. The GPS track showed exactly what Thomas remembered: a straight line from Los Angeles to the current rest area. No stops, no deviations. The door sensors showed no openings during the drive. The truck had remained sealed. A cold realization crept over Thomas. Either the truck systems were malfunctioning and providing false data, or Kevin had not exited through any door, which meant Kevin had disappeared from inside a locked, moving vehicle, which was impossible. Thomas's hands shook as he grabbed his phone again and dialed 911. The Nevada Highway Patrol arrived 40 minutes later. Thomas explained the situation to a skeptical state trooper named Officer Mendez, who took notes while clearly doubting every word. Mendez searched the truck thoroughly, interviewed Thomas repeatedly, checked the GPS data, examined the sleeper cab. "Mr. Brennan, I'm going to be honest with you. This doesn't make any sense. Your brother's belongings are here. His phone is here, but he's not. You say you didn't stop between Los Angeles and here." "No stops," Thomas insisted. "I drove straight through. He was in the sleeper when we left LA. He's not here now." Mendez studied Thomas with the careful assessment of someone trained to spot lies and intoxication. "Have you had anything to drink tonight? Any substances?" "No, nothing. I'm stone sober. You can test me." Mendez did, administering a breathalyzer that showed 0 alcohol. His flashlight examination of Thomas's eyes revealed no signs of drug use. Mendez called for backup in a K-9 unit, treating the situation as a potential crime scene. More troopers arrived. They searched the rest area extensively, brought in a dog that sniffed around the truck and surrounding area without alerting. They found nothing. By dawn, the investigation had expanded. Detectives arrived from Las Vegas. They questioned Thomas for hours, going over every detail, clearly suspecting him of harming his brother despite the lack of evidence, body, or motive. They examined the truck's cargo, bales of textiles that offered no place to hide a body. They checked nearby hospitals and morgues. They issued alerts to other law enforcement agencies. Kevin Brennan had simply vanished. Thomas's parents drove out from Sacramento. The reunion was awful, Thomas trying to explain the inexplicable, distraught mother and suspicious father. His mother sobbed. His father asked hard questions that Thomas couldn't answer. Where was Kevin? What had Thomas done? Why was Thomas lying? But Thomas wasn't lying. He genuinely had no explanation. The investigation continued for weeks. Police examined the truck's maintenance records, wondering if a mechanical defect could explain anything. Engineers studied the sleeper cab design, looking for hidden panels or compartments where someone might be hidden or trapped. Nothing. The sleeper was a straightforward design with no secret spaces. Kevin's bank account showed no activity. His social media went silent. His phone never connected to another network. He was simply gone, as if he'd never existed. Thomas couldn't work. The company put him on leave while the investigation proceeded. He stayed with his parents, spending sleepless nights trying to understand what had happened. He replayed his memories obsessively, wondering if he'd somehow imagined Kevin being in the truck at all. But no, there were text messages between them earlier that day coordinating the pickup. Security footage from the Los Angeles loading dock showed both brothers at the truck. Kevin had definitely been there, and then he was. 2 months after the disappearance, Thomas received a package. No return address, postmarked from Barstow, California. Inside was a USB drive. Thomas plugged it into his laptop with shaking hands. The drive contained a single video file recorded on a phone, Kevin's phone. The timestamp showed September 8, 2017 at 11:47 p.m. during the drive from Los Angeles to the rest area. Thomas clicked play. The video was dark and shaky, showing the interior of the sleeper cab from Kevin's perspective. Kevin's voice, a whisper, Tommy, if you're watching this, something's wrong. Something's really wrong. The camera moved, showing glimpses of the sleepers sealing the curtain, the mattress. I woke up maybe 10 minutes ago. I don't know why. Just felt. Felt like something was watching me. I know you're driving. I can hear the engine, feel us moving. But Tommy, the camera turned to show the sleeper's side wall. The wall is breathing. Thomas's blood went cold. On the video, he could see the sleeper's wall panel moving slightly, bulging inward and outward like a chest rising and falling. It started a few minutes ago, Kevin's whisper continued. I thought I was dreaming, but I'm awake. I'm definitely awake, and the wall is breathing. And Tommy. I think there's something behind it. I can hear it, scratching, moving. The camera shook as Kevin's hand trembled. I want to open the curtain. I don't want you to stop. If we stop, if the truck stops moving, I think it'll get in. Scratching sounds came through the video's audio, faint but distinct. Something scraping against metal behind the wall panel. Kevin's breathing accelerated. Oh God, there's something behind all the walls. I can see them all moving now. The ceiling too. We're inside something. The whole sleeper is inside something alive. Tommy, the video cut to black. Not a stop recording black, but absolute darkness, as if the camera had been plunged into a void where light couldn't exist. Kevin's voice came through the darkness, no longer whispering but screaming. Tommy, help me, IT's taking me. ITS, the scream cut off mid-word. Silence. The video continued for another minute, showing nothing but black, recording nothing but empty silence. Then it ended. Thomas sat frozen, the laptop screen reverting to his desktop. He played the video again and again. The breathing walls, the scratching, Kevin's terror, the darkness, the abrupt silence. What had happened in that sleeper cab while Thomas drove, oblivious just a curtain away? What had taken his brother? Thomas went to the police with the video. They analyzed it for evidence of tampering or editing. It was authentic, unmanipulated. But it proved nothing except that Kevin had experienced something terrifying, or believed he had before disappearing. The investigation officially remained open but had no leads, no suspects, no direction. Kevin Brennan was a missing person, one of thousands who vanish in America every year, most never found. Thomas never drove a truck again. He sold his share of the business, moved to a small apartment in Reno, took a job in a warehouse where his feet stayed firmly on the ground. But he never stopped thinking about that night, about his brother's disappearance, about what Kevin had seen and experienced behind a thin curtain while Thomas drove through the desert darkness. Late at night, Thomas sometimes watches the video, though it devastates him every time. He focuses on the darkness at the end, enhancing the audio, raising the brightness, looking for anything he might have missed. Once, with the audio at maximum volume, Thomas thought he heard something in that final silence. Very faint, almost below the threshold of hearing. A voice, Kevin's voice, coming from somewhere impossibly distant, saying it's bigger on the inside. Thomas doesn't know what that means. Doesn't know if it's real or his desperate mind manufacturing meaning from random noise. But he knows his brother climbed into a sleeper cab in Lowe's Angels and never climbed. That's somewhere between city lights and desert darkness. The walls started breathing, and something that lives behind walls came through. That team driving requires trust. Trust that your partner is sleeping safely in the next compartment. Trust that the vehicle around you is just metal and fabric and nothing more. Thomas broke that trust simply by not knowing it could be broken, by assuming the space behind the curtain remained predictable and safe and bound by the same physical laws as the rest of reality. Now Thomas knows better. Now he knows that there are spaces inside spaces, that breathing walls signal something alive and hungry, that some disappearances have explanations more terrifying than murder or accident or voluntary departure. Kevin is somewhere, Thomas believes. Not dead, not exactly, but somewhere else, somewhere the video showed for just a moment before the darkness consumed everything. Somewhere bigger on the inside than the outside. Somewhere that people enter through breathing walls and never return. And sometimes Thomas wonders if he should have pulled back that curtain during the drive, should have checked on Kevin, should have seen what was happening. But mostly Thomas knows he's grateful he didn't, because whatever took Kevin might have taken both of them. And then there would be no one left to remember, no one left to tell the story of the empty sleeper cab and the brother who vanished into spaces that shouldn't exist. Story 6. The Way Station That Measures Souls. Raymond Tucker had been hauling livestock for 14 years, specializing in cattle transport across the Great Plains states. His white Peterbilt 389 with its distinctive custom livestock trailer was a familiar sight at auction houses and ranches from Texas to Montana. On March 3, 2016, Raymond was transporting 40 head of cattle from a ranch outside Amarillo to a feedlot near Denver, running north on Highway 287 through the Oklahoma Panhandle. The March weather was unpredictable, sunny one moment, threatening the next, but Raymond had checked forecasts and felt confident about the route. The cattle were valuable Angus breeding stock, and Raymond treated every animal in his care with professional respect. He kept the trailer well ventilated, monitored temperatures constantly, and planned his route to minimize stress on the livestock. Around 3:00 p.m., as gray clouds gathered on the western horizon, Raymond saw the way station ahead. This surprised him. He'd driven this stretch of 287 count and didn't recall a permanent way station at this location. Usually, this area only had portable inspection sites that appeared sporadically. But there it stood, a substantial concrete building with multiple lanes and the familiar, all commercial vehicles must enter when open sign illuminated. The station looked official enough, with proper signage and lane markings, though something about it struck Raymond as odd. The architecture seemed wrong somehow, too angular, with proportions that didn't quite match standard highway infrastructure. Raymond had no reason not to comply. His paperwork was current, his weight legal, his equipment properly maintained. He signaled and guided his rig into the way station, following the painted arrows toward the scale. A uniformed figure emerged from the building and waved Raymond forward onto the platform. Raymond rolled his window down as he stopped, expecting the usual routine, verification of documents, possible inspection, a brief delay before being waved through. The attendant approached Raymond's window. He wore what appeared to be a standard Department of Transportation uniform, but the details were slightly off. The patches weren't quite right. The badge looked authentic but bore symbols Raymond didn't recognize. The man's face was unremarkable, almost aggressively average, the kind of face that would be impossible to describe accurately 5 minutes after seeing it. "Afternoon," the attendant said. His voice sounded normal but felt wrong, like a recording played at slightly incorrect speed. "Routine inspection. Need you to step out of the vehicle, please." Raymond complied, grabbing his logbook and registration documents. The March wind had picked up, carrying the smell of approaching rain and something else, something faintly chemical and unpleasant. Behind his truck, Raymond could hear his cattle shifting restlessly in the trailer, their low sounds of distress unusual for animals that had been calm during the entire journey. "They okay back there?" Raymond asked, nodding toward his trailer. "They're fine," the attendant said without looking. "Standard weighing procedure. This will just take a few minutes." He gestured for Raymond to follow him toward a side door of the main building. Raymond hesitated. Normal way station inspections happened at the truck, not inside buildings. "I'd prefer to stay with my animals," Raymond said. "They're valuable stock and they're getting agitated." The attendant's neutral expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes, something that made Raymond's instincts scream warnings. "This is mandatory, Mr. Tucker. Company requires driver presence during full weighing procedures. Please follow me." The attendant had used Raymond's name, though Raymond hadn't provided it yet. The documents were still in Raymond's hand, unexamined. Raymond felt his pulse quicken. Something was very wrong. "How do you know my name?" The attendant smiled, and that smile was the most disturbing thing Raymond had ever seen, perfectly formed but completely empty, a mechanical arrangement of facial muscles without any human warmth. "We have your information already, Mr. Tucker. Everything is in the system. Now please, we're on a schedule." Raymond took a step backward toward his truck. "I think there's been a mistake. I'm going to leave now." He turned to walk back to his Peterbilt, but three more attendants had emerged from the building, positioning themselves between Raymond and his vehicle. They wore identical uniforms and possessed the same eerily average faces. Not similar, but identical, as if manufactured from the same template. "You cannot leave until the weighing is complete," they said in unison, their voices perfectly synchronized. Pure fear flooded Raymond's system. He was a big man, 6'3" and solidly built from years of physical labor, but he knew instinctively that running or fighting would be futile. These things, because Raymond no longer thought of them as people, had positioned themselves with predatory efficiency. "What do you want?" Raymond's voice came out steady despite his terror. "What is this place really?" "This is a weigh station," the first attendant said. "We measure commercial vehicles, we measure cargo, we measure." He paused, that empty smile widening. "Everything." The attendants moved closer, forming a circle around Raymond. He noticed for the first time that they cast no shadows despite the afternoon sun breaking through the clouds. The realization made his stomach drop. "We've been waiting for you, Raymond Tucker. Your weight has been calculated, but we need to verify the measurements. We need to weigh your load." "You can weigh the truck," Raymond said, hearing the desperation creeping into his voice. "That's what scales are for. Weigh the whole rig. I'm legal. I'm under the weight limit." "We're not weighing the truck," the attendant said, and the others laughed, identical laughs, mechanical and precise. "We're weighing what's inside the cargo. We're weighing the souls." Raymond's mind reeled. Souls. They wanted to weigh souls. The cattle. They were talking about his cattle. "They're animals," Raymond said. "Livestock. They don't have." He stopped because he didn't actually believe that. Raymond had worked with animals his entire adult life. He'd seen too much intelligence in their eyes, too much personality, too much to believe they were mere biological machines. "Everything has weight," the attendant said. "Physical weight, yes, but also essential weight. The weight of consciousness, of experience, of suffering and joy and fear. Every living thing accumulates this weight throughout its existence. We measure it, we record it, we collect our fees." The attendants moved closer still, and Raymond could see now that their uniforms weren't quite cloth. The material had a texture like shed skin, organic and disturbing. "Your cargo carries substantial weight, Mr. Tucker. 40 animals, each with years of experience, each with accumulated consciousness. That's considerable freight. And you, as the transporter, you've added to their weight. Every mile of stress, every moment of fear in the trailer, every day of their lives spent in confinement, all of it adds up. All of it must be weighed and accounted for." Raymond understood then with horrible clarity. This wasn't about livestock regulations or transportation laws. This was something else entirely, something ancient and terrible wearing the disguise of mundane bureaucracy. A judgment, a reckoning. "I've treated those animals well," Raymond said. "I've done everything right. Proper ventilation, careful driving, minimal stress. I'm a professional." "Yes," the attendant agreed. "You are better than most. But better is not innocent. You still transport them to slaughter. You still profit from their fear. The weight accumulates regardless of your intentions." The attendants reached out simultaneously, their hands touching Raymond's arms. Their fingers were too cold, their grips too strong. They pulled him toward the building's side door, which had opened to reveal darkness beyond. Not the darkness of an unlit room, but absolute black that seemed to absorb light. Raymond struggled, his boots scraping against the pavement. From his trailer, the cattle's bellowing intensified, panic evident in their cries. "Let me go, you can't do this. Someone will see, other trucks will come." But even as he said it, Raymond realized no other vehicles had entered the weigh station. The highway beyond was empty, no traffic in either direction, as if the road itself had been suspended from normal reality. "No one comes here who isn't called," the attendant said. "You accumulated sufficient weight to trigger our scales. You crossed the threshold that requires measurement. This is your stop, Raymond Tucker." They dragged him to the threshold of darkness. Raymond grabbed the doorframe, his fingers finding purchase on the cold metal. "What happens if I fail your weighing? What happens if my weight is too much?" "Then you pay the fee," the attendant said simply. "The weight must balance. If you've transported suffering, experience equivalent suffering. If you've carried fear, you must know equivalent fear. The scales must balance, Mr. Tucker. That's the fundamental law. All debts must be paid." Raymond's fingers were slipping. The darkness beyond the door seemed to pull at him like a physical force. He could hear sounds within it, sounds of distress, human and animal, a chorus of terror that might have been echoing for centuries. "I have a family," Raymond pleaded. "A wife, 2 kids, please. I've made mistakes, but I can change. I can stop hauling livestock." "I can." "The weight is already accumulated," the attendant interrupted. "Change affects future weight, not past weight. Past weight must be measured and balanced. There is no negotiation with the scales." Raymond's grip failed. He fell backward into the darkness, the cold swallowing him instantly. The last thing he saw before the black consumed his vision was the attendant's empty smile and those identical faces watching impassively as he disappeared. Raymond found himself in a space that defied normal geometry. He was standing, or existing, since standing implied a floor and up-down orientation that didn't quite apply here, in darkness that pressed against him from all sides. But within the darkness, he could see things. Glimpses, flashes. His entire career as a livestock hauler playing out in reverse, every trip, every animal he'd transported. But he was seeing it from their perspective. He felt the fear of being loaded into unfamiliar trailers, the stress of motion and noise, the confusion of separation from herd mates, the anticipation of pain. Thousands of animals, thousands of journeys, all of it compressed into a single overwhelming experience. Raymond experienced every moment of fear he'd caused, intentionally or not. Every cattle prod he'd used, every rough handling, every too-fast turn that had sent animals stumbling. But more than that, he experienced the accumulated dread of animals who instinctively knew their destination, who smelled the slaughterhouse long before arrival, who understood on some level that the journey was one way. The weight of all that fear and suffering crashed into Raymond's consciousness like a physical blow. He tried to scream but had no mouth in this place, tried to run but had no legs. He existed only as consciousness, forced to experience the accumulated toll of his profession. Time meant nothing here. Raymond might have been in the darkness for seconds or centuries. The experience was infinite and instantaneous simultaneously. He understood now what the attendant had meant about weight, the psychic weight of suffering, even suffering deemed necessary or legal or economically justified. It all accumulated. It all had to be balanced. Eventually, though eventually implied a linear time that didn't exist in this space, Raymond became aware of the scale. Not a physical scale, but a conceptual one, vast and absolute. On one side, the weight of suffering he'd caused. On the other, the weight of his own soul, his intentions, his kindnesses, his moments of genuine care for the animals he'd transported. The scales moved, tilting and swaying as unfathomable forces calculated balances that human mathematics couldn't express. Raymond watched, helpless, as the scales found their equilibrium. The weight wasn't equal. The suffering outweighed his positive qualities. The debt required payment. But the scales also showed that Raymond's debt wasn't among the worst. Some transporters, some drivers who actively tormented their cargo carried debts so massive their scales tilted to absolute extremes. Raymond's debt was significant but not irredeemable. The scales determined his fee. Light returned abruptly. Raymond gasped, finding himself on his knees on the pavement outside the way station building. The attendants were gone. The building itself looked different, older, more decrepit, as if decades had passed in moments. Raymond's hands were shaking violently. His face was wet with tears he didn't remember crying. He looked around wildly, trying to orient himself. His truck sat on the scale where he'd left it. The cattle in his trailer had gone completely silent. Raymond stumbled to the trailer and looked inside through the ventilation slats. The animals stood motionless, calm, their eyes watching him with what Raymond swore was understanding. They knew. They knew where he'd been, what he'd experienced. Some barrier between human and animal had been erased during his time in the darkness. Raymond checked his watch. Only 5 minutes had passed since he'd entered the way station. 5 minutes that had contained lifetimes of experience. He walked on unsteady legs to his truck's cab and found a piece of paper on his seat, an official-looking form titled Weight Measurement Receipt. The document listed his cargo weight, his vehicle weight, and a third category, consciousness weight 847 units. Below that, fee assessed 847 units. Payment plan, ongoing. Balance will be collected incrementally through dreams, memories, and periodic additional measurements. Raymond understood. He would pay his debt gradually, through night-making flashbacks, through moments of sudden, overwhelming empathy that would make his life more difficult, through the psychological weight he would carry every day. The scales had found him guilty, but granted him time to pay. He climbed into his truck and drove away from the way station, not looking back. When he checked his mirrors, the facility was gone, just empty roadside where a building had stood moments before. Raymond completed his delivery to Denver, but his career ended with that trip. He couldn't continue transporting livestock, couldn't bear the weight of knowing what he now knew, feeling what he now felt. He sold his truck and trailer, took a job managing a ranch where he worked directly with living animals, caring for them rather than transporting them to death. The nightmares came regularly, immersive experiences where he was the animal, feeling fear and confusion and pain. Each nightmare was a payment, another unit deducted from his debt of 847. Over the following years, Raymond became an advocate for better livestock treatment, for more humane transportation standards, for recognition of animal consciousness in agricultural practices. His sudden conversion puzzled colleagues and family, but Raymond couldn't explain the true catalyst. How could he describe the way station that appeared and disappeared, the attendants with identical faces, the darkness where souls were measured? 10 years later, in 2026, Raymond was driving through Oklahoma on ranch business when he saw it again, the way station on Highway 287. His heart seized with panic and recognition. The open sign was illuminated. But as Raymond approached, dreading another measurement, another journey into darkness, the sign flickered and changed to closed. The attendant, the same one, unchanged by a decade, stood at the roadside and nodded once to Raymond as he drove past. An acknowledgement. Raymond checked his rearview mirror. The attendant was holding up a sign, balance, 0 units, debt paid. Raymond pulled over a mile down the road and sobbed with relief. 10 years of nightmares, of carrying psychological weight, of living with the knowledge of what he'd caused. It was finally paid. The scales had balanced. He was released. But Raymond knew he would never forget, would never stop seeing animals as conscious beings whose suffering mattered, whose fear had weight that accumulated on invisible scales, maintained by forces that dressed themselves in the mundane disguise of highway infrastructure. Sometimes Raymond warns other livestock haulers about the way station, but they laugh or look at him with concern. They think he's speaking metaphorically, offering some kind of philosophical message about responsibility and consequences. They don't understand that somewhere on Highway 287, possibly in Oklahoma or possibly in a space adjacent to Oklahoma, there is a way station that measures more than tons and axle loads. It measures souls, it calculates debts, and it collects payments from those who accumulate too much weight, who cause too much suffering, who transport fear and pain without reckoning with the cost. Raymond paid his debt. But the way station is still there, still open, still waiting for the next driver whose scales have tilted too far toward darkness, whose cargo carries weight that goes beyond the physical, whose journey must be interrupted for measurement and judgment, and the cold calculation of how much suffering requires how much payment, unit by unit, nightmare by nightmare, until the balance is restored and the scales finally, mercifully, read zero. Story 7. The Convoy That Never Ended. Mitchell Davies had driven independently for most of his career, preferring solitude to the social complications of team driving or convoy travel. But in November 2015, unusual circumstances led him to join an impromptu convoy of 5 trucks heading east across Wyoming on Interstate 80. A severe winter storm had been forecast, and the truck stop community buzz suggested safety in numbers. If one rig had trouble, others could help, and the convoy's collective presence would be more visible to snowplows and emergency services. Mitchell, 61 years old and practical by nature, saw the logic. His burgundy Western Star 5700 XE took the 3rd position in the convoy, between a Freightliner hauling automotive parts and an international carrying industrial equipment. The convoy formed around 6:00 p.m. at the Little America truck stop, just as the first snowflakes began falling. The lead truck, a Navy Kenworth driven by a man who'd introduced himself simply as Carson, coordinated on CB Channel 19. Carson had a confident voice and claimed 30 years of experience driving in winter conditions. The other drivers, names Mitchell caught as Jacob, Chen, and someone who went by Diamondback, all sounded competent and experienced. They agreed on convoy protocols: maintain 40-foot spacing, no passing within the convoy, synchronized stops only, continuous CB communication. Mitchell felt by the organization. This storm would be bad, but they'd handle it together. Convoy departed Little America as darkness fell and the snow intensified. Mitchell maintained his position behind the Freightliner, watching its taillights glow red in the white chaos. The CB radio crackled with periodic check-ins. Lead truck all clear ahead, visibility maybe 50 feet. Number 2 maintaining spacing. Number 3 good here, Mitchell would respond. Number 4 tracking fine. Tail truck, convoy intact. The routine calls continued as they pushed east into the worsening storm. An hour passed, 2 hours. The storm had become a full blizzard, with wind-driven snow reducing visibility to almost nothing. Mitchell focused intensely on those taillights ahead, the only fixed point in a world of swirling white. His speedometer showed 35 miles per hour, dangerously slow for a highway but appropriate for the conditions. The CB continued its reassuring chatter. Everything seemed under control, a good plan executing well. Then Mitchell noticed something odd. The highway mile markers, when he could glimpse them through the storm, seemed wrong. He'd passed mile marker 235 at least twice, maybe 3 times. Mitchell keyed his CB. Number 3 here. Is anyone else noticing the mile markers? I think we might be going in circles somehow. Carson's voice came back immediately. Negative, number 3. GPS shows steady eastward progress. Storms probably got you disoriented. Stay in formation. Mitchell checked his own GPS. Carson was right. The device showed them traveling east on I-80, making reasonable progress given the conditions. But those mile markers nagged at him. He'd been driving long enough to trust his instincts, and his instincts said something was wrong. Anyone want to stop for a break? Mitchell suggested. We've been driving 2+ hours. Might be good to regroup, check conditions. A pause on the CB, then Carson responded. Negative, number 3. Storm's too severe to stop safely. We stop, we might not get moving again. Better to maintain momentum. We'll stop at the next truck stop with services. That made sense. Mitchell settled back into the rhythm of following taillights through snow, but his unease grew. Another hour passed and the CB conversations continued, the same check-ins, the same status updates. But Mitchell began to notice that the voices sounded flat, rehearsed, like recorded messages playing on loop. Lead truck all clear ahead, visibility maybe 50 feet. The exact same wording Carson had used hours ago. Number 2, maintaining space. Jacob's voice, identical phrasing to earlier. Mitchell's skin prickled. Number 4, you still with us? Mitchell called out, breaking the routine pattern. Silence. Then after a too long pause, number 4, tracking fine. The same response as before, same inflection like a recording triggered by Mitchell's query. Diamondback, that you? Say something different, man. Tell me where you're from. Another pause then. Number 4, tracking fine. The exact same response, identical in every detail. Mitchell's hands tightened on the steering wheel. The taillights ahead of him glowed steadily, unchanging. Behind him, he could see headlights maintaining perfect distance. The convoy moved like a machine, too precise, too synchronized. This wasn't right. This was very far from right. I'm pulling over, Mitchell announced. Something's wrong. I'm stopping. He began to slow down, moving toward the shoulder. But as his speed decreased, so did the truck ahead of him. As he accelerated slightly, the Freightliner accelerated. The spacing remained exactly 40 feet, no matter what Mitchell did. He tried changing lanes, but his steering wheel seemed to move through thick resistance, and the truck barely responded. The Western Star stayed in formation as if locked on rails. Mitchell's breathing accelerated. He was trapped. The convoy wasn't voluntary anymore, if it ever had been. He tried his phone. No signal. Tried the GPS. Still showing eastward progress on I-80, but when Mitchell looked at the detailed map, he noticed it was just showing a generic highway overlay, no specific landmarks or exits. His odometer was advancing, his fuel gauge dropping slowly, but he was no longer certain he was actually moving through real space. "Let me out," Mitchell shouted into the CB. "Stop the convoy, I want out." His voice echoed strangely, as if the radio was broadcasting into an empty void. A response came. Just silence, then the routine messages resumed. Lead truck all clear ahead, visibility maybe 50 feet. The same words, always the same words. Mitchell tried to think rationally despite his rising panic. When had things changed? The convoy had seemed normal initially. Real drivers, real conversation. At what point had it become this? Had the other drivers noticed? Were they trapped too, or had they changed into something else? Mitchell squinted through the snow at the truck ahead of him. The Freightliner's trailer looked solid enough, but something about it seemed wrong, the proportions slightly off, the way it moved not quite matching how a real trailer should sway in wind. He grabbed his logbook and began writing, documenting everything as if creating a record might somehow anchor him to reality. November 12, 2015. Convoy formation at Little America. 5 trucks. Storm worsened. Mile markers repeating. CB messages looping. Can't stop. Can't leave formation. Odometer shows 127 miles traveled, but I don't think I've moved at all. GPS is lying. The trucks around me aren't real, or I'm not real, or we're all trapped in something that looks like I-80 but is. Hours blended together. Mitchell's clock showed midnight, then 1 a.m., then 2 a.m. But he felt no fatigue, no need for rest. His fuel gauge had dropped to half full and stayed there, the needle frozen. The storm continued with the exact same intensity. No variation, no lulls, no changes. A storm locked in stasis. Mitchell experimented with turning off his headlights. The world beyond his windshield remained exactly the same brightness, as if the light was coming from everywhere and nowhere, independent of his truck's electrical system. The CB continued its loop. Mitchell started timing the messages. They repeated every 7 minutes like clockwork. Carson's voice, Jacob's voice, Chen's voice, Diamondback's voice, his own voice. Wait, his own voice. Mitchell listened carefully during the next cycle. Yes. Number 3, good here. His voice, his words from hours ago, now playing back as part of the loop. Mitchell hadn't made that call recently, but there it was, integrated into the sequence. Mitchell realized with creeping horror that he was becoming part of the loop. The convoy was absorbing him, turning him from participant into component, from driver into recording. He looked at his hands on the steering wheel. They looked normal, felt normal. But were they? Was he still Mitchell Davies, or was he becoming a Mitchell-shaped element in an eternal convoy, a ghost driver in a ghost truck following ghost taillights through a ghost storm that would never end? He tried to break the pattern again, tried to force deviation. Mitchell leaned on his air horn. The sound blared but seemed to be absorbed instantly by the storm, producing no echo. He flashed his lights in SOS pattern. Nothing changed. The convoy maintained its perfect formation, its mechanical precision. Mitchell screamed, raw and primal, a sound of pure frustration and fear. His scream vanished into the white noise of the storm as if it had never existed. The dashboard clock read 3:33 a.m. Mitchell stared at it. The numbers seemed significant somehow, though he couldn't articulate why. He watched the clock, waiting for it to change to 3:34. It didn't. The minutes didn't advance. Time had stopped, or looped, or meaningless. Mitchell sat behind the wheel of a truck that was driving but not moving, part of a convoy that was traveling but not arriving, trapped in a storm that was falling but never accumulating. A new thought occurred to Mitchell, more disturbing than the rest. What if this had been his destination all along? What if the convoy hadn't trapped him, but rather, he'd been selected for the convoy because he belonged here? What if everyone in the convoy was someone who'd been driving toward this, not geographically but metaphysically? Drivers who'd driven alone for too long, who'd become disconnected from reality, who'd spent so many hours in the liminal space of highway night driving that they'd slipped through a crack into this place where the driving never stopped. Mitchell began to notice other things. The texture of his steering wheel felt less real, more like a memory of texture. His body felt lightweight, insubstantial. When he looked at his reflection in the driver's side window, his face was slightly blurred, features indistinct, as if he was losing definition. He was fading, becoming less individual person and more generic driver, a template, a placeholder. "I'm Mitchell Davies," he said aloud, trying to anchor himself. "I'm 61 years old. I live in Rapid City. I have 2 ex-wives and a daughter named Sarah. I drive a Western Star. I haul agricultural equipment. I'm real. I exist." But even as he spoke, the details felt slippery, hard to hold on to. Was his daughter named Sarah, or was it Sharon? Did he live in Rapid City or Rapid Falls? The certainty eroded like sand. The CB messages continued. Lead truck all clear ahead. Number 2 maintaining spacing. Number 3 good here. Mitchell's own voice, but he hadn't spoken. The convoy had his voice now, using it without his participation. He was becoming automated, a process running without consciousness. Mitchell fought against it, trying to maintain his sense of self, but the convoy's rhythm was hypnotic, lulling him into acceptance. Time became completely abstract. Mitchell might have been in the convoy for hours or years, the eternal now of following taillights through storm. Eventually, or immediately, or never, Mitchell noticed he was no longer bothered by his situation. It seemed normal now, natural. This was what driving was, following lights, maintaining spacing, continuing forever. The anxiety had faded. The questions had faded. Only the convoy remained. Mitchell's hands on the wheel, the taillights ahead, the headlights behind, the rhythm of the road that wasn't really a road, the storm that wasn't really a storm, the eternal present tense of the convoy where nothing changed, ended, and nothing mattered except maintaining formation. A part of Mitchell, the part that was still separate enough to observe, understood that he'd been absorbed. He was a component now, not a person. Truck number 3 in a convoy that traveled nowhere forever, that added new trucks when it found suitable drivers, that grew longer and longer as more souls joined the formation. Somewhere behind him, a 6th truck had appeared, its headlights steady in Mitchell's mirrors. A new driver freshly trapped. Soon there would be a 7th, an 8th. The convoy had no destination because the convoy itself was the destination, a place where drivers went a drive eternally, where the journey never ended because ending would require arriving, and arriving would mean the convoy had a purpose beyond its own existence. Number 3 good here, Mitchell's voice said on the CB. He hadn't keyed the handset. Didn't need to. The convoy spoke for him now. Mitchell Davies, the individual, was nearly gone. Only the driver remained, the pure function of driving, stripped of identity and purpose, following lights through snow. Forever. The convoy that never ended because ending was never the point. Just driving, just following. Just the eternal white chaos and the red lights ahead and the rhythm of wheels on pavement that might not be pavement, might not be anything except the idea of road, the concept of highway, sustained by the collective belief of all the lost drivers who joined the formation. Mitchell's last coherent thought before the final dissolution of self was a simple observation. There are so many ways to disappear. You can vanish in an instant, or you can fade gradually. You can leave the world, or the world can leave you. Mitchell was still driving, still breathing, still existing in some sense. But Mitchell Davies, the person, with his memories and fears and daughter whose name he could no longer quite remember, that Mitchell was gone, replaced by a component in a machine that looked like trucks but was something else. Something that fed on lonely drivers and long roads and the spaces between places where reality grew thin and strange. The convoy rolled on. Always had. Always would. And truck number 3, right on schedule, maintained its spacing and followed the lights, and continued the journey that went nowhere through the storm that never cleared on the highway that existed in the spaces between consciousness and nightmare, forever and ever, until the end of all roads, which would never come. Story 8. The cargo that shouldn't be OPENED. Antonio raced in freight shipping for 19 years, maintaining an impeccable record of on-time deliveries and undamaged cargo. His reputation for reliability made him a preferred driver for specialized or sensitive loads that required extra care and discretion. On July 17, 2014, Antonio received what seemed like a straightforward assignment: pick up a sealed container in Newark, New Jersey, and transport it to a private facility in rural Pennsylvania. The shipping manifest listed the cargo simply as industrial equipment, fragile, temperature sensitive. The pay was unusually generous, nearly 3 times his normal rate, but the dispatcher explained this reflected the cargo's value and the strict handling requirements. Antonio, always professional, asked no unnecessary questions and accepted the job. The pickup location was a warehouse in Newark's industrial district, a nondescript building with minimal signage. Antonio backed his Volvo VNL 780 to the loading dock where workers used a forklift to load a single container, a reinforced metal box approximately 8 feet long, 4 feet wide, and 4 feet tall. The container was secured with industrial straps and prominently labeled with warning stickers. Do not open, controlled atmosphere, handle with extreme care, and a temperature range specification of 3640 degrees Fahrenheit. One of the warehouse workers, a nervous-looking man in his 30s, approached Antonio before departure. "Listen," the worker said quietly, glancing around as if worried about being overheard. "I helped pack this cargo. I'm probably not supposed to say anything, but just don't open the container, no matter what, even if you hear something, especially if you hear something. Just deliver it sealed and drive away fast." Antonio frowned. "Hear something? What's in there?" The worker's eyes widened. "I don't know, man. I really don't. They wouldn't tell us. But when we were loading it before they sealed it, I saw inside for just a second. It was dark and I couldn't see clearly, but..." He trailed off, looking genuinely frightened. "Just don't open it. Promise me you won't open it." Antonio felt unease creep into his gut but forced a professional smile. "I don't open cargo anyway. That's not my job. My job is delivery. Don't worry." The worker nodded but didn't look reassured. He hurried back into the warehouse as Antonio secured his trailer doors and prepared to depart. Antonio performed his standard inspection, checked the temperature monitoring equipment, verified the reefer unit was functioning properly, confirmed the container was properly secured. Everything looked correct. The cargo wasn't making any sounds. It was just a box, a very well sealed, heavily reinforced, mysteriously valuable box. Antonio headed west from Newark toward Pennsylvania, taking Interstate 78 through increasingly rural landscapes as afternoon faded toward evening. The reefer unit hummed steadily, maintaining the specified temperature range. Antonio kept his CB radio on but not particularly active. This route was usually quiet, and he preferred listening to his playlist of classic rock. Hours passed without incident. The cargo rode smoothly, silent and sealed. Around 8:30 p.m., as daylight faded completely and Antonio drove through a remote stretch of Pennsylvania forest, he heard it for the first time. A sound from the trailer. A soft scratching noise like fingernails on metal. Antonio's attention snapped to his mirrors, as if he could somehow see through the trailer walls. The scratching continued for perhaps 10 seconds, then stopped. Antonio told himself it was just the cargo shifting slightly. Metal containers sometimes made sounds as they settled. Nothing unusual, nothing worrying. The scratching came again 15 minutes later, slightly louder, definitely coming from inside the trailer. Antonio's grip on the steering wheel tightened. The worker's warning echoed in his mind, especially if you hear something. But what did that mean? What could be in a sealed container that would make sounds? Maybe the industrial equipment had a motor or mechanical component that activated periodically. Yes, that made sense. Perfectly rational explanation. The scratching evolved into knocking. Rhythmic knocking. 3 knocks, a pause, 3 more knocks. The pattern repeated several times, then stopped. Antonio felt sweat forming on his forehead despite the cab's air conditioning. That wasn't mechanical. That was deliberate. That was something trying to communicate. No, Antonio said aloud to himself. That's crazy. It's probably just the reefer compressor, or the cargo settling against the container walls. Or he couldn't think of another plausible explanation. His phone rang, making him jump. The caller ID showed the dispatch office. Antonio answered, grateful for the distraction. Ray's here. Antonio, checking on your progress. GPS shows you're on schedule. Any issues? The dispatcher sounded routine, bored even. Fine, Antonio said, deciding not to mention the sounds. Cargo secure, temperature steady. Should make the delivery by 11 p.m. as planned. Good. Remember, when you arrive, just drop the container and leave. Don't wait for them to unload or inspect. They'll call us to confirm receipt. Just drop and go. That was unusual protocol, but Antonio didn't argue. Understood, drop and go. And Antonio, if you experience anything unusual with the cargo, do not investigate. Do not open the container. Just continue to the destination. The cargo is sensitive. Understanding its nature isn't part of your responsibility. Only transportation is. The dispatcher's voice had changed, become more serious, almost threatening. Antonio felt his unease deepen. What exactly am I transporting? I have a right to know if it's hazardous or illegal or… It's neither hazardous nor illegal, the dispatcher interrupted. It's just sensitive, and your very generous payment reflects our expectation of discretion and compliance with instructions. No questions, no deviations. Clear. Clear, Antonio said quietly, though it wasn't clear at all. The dispatcher ended the call. Antonio drove in silence for several minutes, listening intently. The knocking had stopped, but now he heard something else. A low humming sound, almost like a voice. Not words, just a sustained vocalization. It rose and fell in pitch, almost melodic, almost human. Antonio pulled up the cargo's paperwork on his tablet, searching for more details. The shipping manifest was minimal. No detailed inventory, just the vague, industrial equipment description. But there was a document attached he hadn't noticed before, a liability waiver. Antonio scanned through the legal language. Standard stuff about damage claims and insurance, but one clause caught his attention. Driver acknowledges cargo may exhibit unusual properties during transport. Driver agrees to maintain cargo containment regardless of auditory, visual, or psychological manifestations. Opening cargo container constitutes breach of contract and forfeits all compensation. Psychological manifestations. What did that mean? Antonio's mind raced with possibilities, none of them comforting. Was this some kind of psychological experiment? Government cargo? Something illegal that the dispatcher had lied about? The humming from the trailer continued, wavering between notes. Antonio turned his radio up louder, trying to drown it out. But even over the music, he could hear it, feel it. The humming seemed to resonate in his chest, vibrating at a frequency that made his teeth ache. Then came the words, faint but unmistakable, "Let me out." Antonio's blood went cold. Please, a voice. Someone was in that container. Someone alive, conscious, trapped. A person. Antonio immediately grabbed his phone to call 911. This was kidnapping, trafficking, something horrible. He had to report it. But before he could dial, the voice came again, clearer now. Antonio, Antonio Reyes, let me out, Antonio. It knew his name. How could it know his name? Antonio's finger hovered over the phone. I know you hear me, Antonio. I know you're afraid, but you don't need to be. I'm not here to hurt you. I'm a prisoner. They locked me in here. They're transporting me to a place I don't want to go. Please, you seem like a good man. Help me. Antonio's professional instinct said, do not engage, continue to destination, let someone else handle this. But his human instinct said there's a person in a locked box, scared and trapped, begging for help. Who are you? Antonio called out, unsure if his voice would even carry to the trailer. What are you? A person, the voice said. Just a person like you. They said I was dangerous, but I'm not. They lied to you, Antonio. The cargo isn't equipment, it's me. They're moving me to a facility where they'll do experiments. I haven't done anything wrong. I just want to go home to my family, please. Antonio's hands shook on the wheel. This couldn't be real, but what if it was? What if he was unknowingly participating in something criminal? If you're a person, why would they ship you in a sealed container? That doesn't make sense. Because I'm special, the voice said. I can do things that scare them. I can see things, know things. They call me dangerous, but I've never hurt anyone. Antonio, you have a daughter named Maria. She's 16. You worry about her constantly. You're driving truck to pay for her college. You're a good father. Antonio's heart hammered. That was all true. How could the voice know that? How do you know about Maria? I told you, I see things, know things. That's why they're afraid of me. That's why they locked me in this box. But Antonio, I can help you too. I can see that Maria is going through something difficult right now. Something you don't know about. She's dating someone you wouldn't approve of. Someone older, dangerous. I can tell you how to protect her, but first you have to let me out. Antonio felt manipulation even as part of him desperately wanted to know if this was true. Was Maria in trouble? Or was this thing, whatever it was, just exploiting his fears? I can't let you out, Antonio said firmly. If you're really a person being transported illegally, I'll call the police. They can handle it properly. No, the voice became a shriek. No police, they're part of it. They'll just deliver me back to the people who captured me. Antonio, you're my only chance, please. The desperation was genuine, but Antonio's instincts screamed warnings. Everything about this felt wrong. The temperature alarm suddenly blared. Antonio checked his reefer monitor. The container's internal temperature was rising rapidly. 48 degrees, 52 degrees, 58 degrees. The specified maximum was 40. Antonio, the container is temperature controlled to keep me weak, the voice said, calmer now. But I'm strong enough to override it. I'm heating the container. If it gets too hot, the failsafe will unlock the doors automatically. You can't stop it, but you can help me. Open the doors now, let me out safely, and I promise I won't hurt you. I'll just leave. You'll never see me again. Stop it, Antonio demanded. Stop whatever you're doing. Stop raising the temperature. I can't stop, the voice said, and Antonio heard something new in its tone, something gleeful, something that confirmed all his fears. The temperature will keep rising until the locks fail. The question is whether you help me willingly and I show gratitude, or whether I have to force my way out and I'm less friendly. The temperature hit 72 degrees. Antonio frantically called the dispatcher. No answer, straight to voicemail. He tried the shipping company's emergency line. Same result. No one available. By design, Antonio realized. They'd isolated him, made sure he couldn't get help during transport. This was a test or a setup or both. Antonio, 90 degrees now, the voice said. The locks will fail at 110. That gives you about 20 minutes to make the right choice. Let me out now while I'm still grateful. Antonio's mind raced. He could pull over and run, abandon the truck and cargo, call 911 from a safe distance. But what if the thing in the container escaped anyway? What if it was dangerous and Antonio had helped it get loose by bringing it here? The remote Pennsylvania forest offered nowhere to hide, no help nearby. What are you really? Antonio asked. The truth. No lies. A long silence. Then, you wouldn't understand the truth, Antonio. Your language doesn't have words for what I am. Your species doesn't have concepts for it, but I'm contained because I'm feared. I'm feared because I'm powerful, and I'm very, very tired of being locked up. The temperature reached 98 degrees. Antonio made a decision. He pulled the truck over to the shoulder, grabbed a heavy flashlight from under his seat, the only weapon available, and climbed out. He walked around to the trailer doors, his flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. The reefer unit was working frantically, trying to cool the container but losing the battle. Antonio could hear the compressor. Smart choice, Antonio, the voice said, somehow audible even outside the trailer. Open the doors, release me. I'll remember your cooperation. Antonio reached for his phone instead and dialed 911. This time it connected. 911, what's your emergency? I'm a truck driver on Route 78 in Pennsylvania, Antonio said rapidly. I'm transporting something dangerous, something alive and possibly not human in a sealed container. It's trying to break out. I need immediate help. Police, military, I don't know, but send someone. The 911 operator's voice remained professional but skeptical. Sir, can you describe the threat more specifically? I can't, Antonio admitted. It's in a locked container. It's been talking to me. It knows things it shouldn't know. The temperature containment is failing. Please just send help. Sir, we're dispatching state police to your location. Stay with your vehicle. Don't approach the container. Too late for that. Antonio was already at the container. The temperature read 107 degrees, 3 degrees from lock failure. Antonio heard something inside the container shifting, metal groaning. Whatever was in there was preparing to emerge. Antonio, you called the police, the voice said, disappointed. That was unwise. That was very unwise. Now I can't let you go. You know too much. You've seen too much. When I get out, and I will get out, you'll be the first problem I solve. The temperature hit 110 degrees. The locks clicked, failed, released. Antonio ran. He sprinted away from the trailer into the forest, his flashlight beam bouncing wildly. Behind him, he heard the trailer doors opening, metal scraping metal. Then footsteps. Or things that sounded like footsteps but wrong, too many of them, with a rhythm that didn't match human gait. Antonio didn't look back. He crashed through underbrush, branches tearing at his face and arms, lungs burning. The thing behind him made sounds, laughter, but filtered through something inhuman, multiplied and distorted. It was playing with him, letting him run, enjoying the hunt. Antonio's foot caught a root and he went down hard, his flashlight flying from his grip. He scrambled in the darkness, disoriented, terrified. The laughter grew closer. Then, suddenly, sirens. Lights flashing through the trees. The state police had arrived impossibly fast, or maybe Antonio had lost track of time. Vehicles screeched to a halt on the highway. Voices shouted. Spotlights flooded the area. Antonio screamed, "Here! I'm here! There's something in the woods!" Heavy footsteps approached, but these sounded human. 2 state troopers found Antonio, pulled him up, carried him back to the road. More vehicles had arrived, not just state police, but unmarked black SUVs. Men in suits and tactical gear were surrounding Antonio's trailer, weapons drawn, flashlights sweeping the area. One of them, a gray-haired man with colonel insignia, approached Antonio. "Mr. Reyes, I'm Colonel Morrison. Are you injured?" Antonio shook his head, too shaken to speak coherently. "The cargo," Morrison continued, "did it escape containment?" Antonio nodded toward the forest. "It's in there. It was chasing me." Morrison spoke into a radio. "Containment breach confirmed. Initiate recapture protocol." Tactical teams moved into the forest with specialized equipment, bright lights, strange humming devices. Morrison turned back to Antonio. "You opened the container." "No," Antonio said. "The temperature failsafe opened it. The thing inside made the temperature rise. It tricked the system." Morrison's expression hardened. "The failsafe shouldn't have activated. It was disabled specifically to prevent." He stopped himself. "Never mind, Mr. Reyes, you're going to be debriefed. Everything you saw and heard tonight is classified. You'll sign non-disclosure agreements. You'll receive your payment plus a substantial bonus for your trouble, and you'll never speak of this again. Understood?" "What was in that container?" Antonio demanded. "What the hell did you people make me transport?" "Something we contained 3 years ago," Morrison said quietly. "Something that should never have been moved. But the facility it was in was compromised. We had to relocate it. We thought we'd taken sufficient precautions." He looked toward the forest where the tactical teams were working. Apparently not. A commotion in the woods, shouting. Then a sound that made Antonio's skin crawl, that inhuman laughter again, but amplified, triumphant. One of the tactical team members came running out of the forest, his face pale. "Sir, it's gone. We lost containment. It dispersed into the woods, could be anywhere now." Morrison cursed and immediately got on his radio, calling for more teams, aerial support, containment specialists. He turned to Antonio. "Mr. Reyes, you need to leave. Now get in one of the police cruisers. They'll take you to a secure location for debriefing. Do not return to your truck. Do not go home until we clear you. The entity knows who you are. It might come looking." Antonio felt his blood turn to ice. "Maria, my daughter. You need to protect my daughter. That thing knew about her." "It might. We'll have protective detail on your family within the hour," Morrison assured him. "Now go now." Antonio was hustled into a state police cruiser that sped away from them. Through the rear window, he watched the chaos recede, the lights, the vehicles, the armed teams disappearing into the forest. He never saw what they were hunting, never learned what it truly was. The next 3 days were a blur of interrogations, medical examinations, psychological evaluations, and legal paperwork. Antonio signed documents he barely read, agreeing to silence in exchange for payment and family protection. When he was finally released, Antonio found his trucking contract had been terminated with generous severance. The official reason was downsizing. The unofficial reason, conveyed by a government agent who visited his home, was that Antonio would never be allowed to transport specialized cargo again. Too much exposure, too much risk. Antonio didn't argue. He found work at a local warehouse, a job that kept him on the ground, in familiar territory, far from sealed containers and roads that led to places where impossible things were locked in boxes and transported through the night. But Antonio never felt truly safe again. Because sometimes, late at night, he heard that laughter, distant, distorted, coming from nowhere and everywhere. And sometimes he received phone calls from numbers that didn't exist, with silence on the other end or that single word, Antonio. The thing had escaped, was still out there, remembered him. And Antonio lived every day wondering if it would eventually come back to finish the conversation they'd started on that dark Pennsylvania road. The conversation interrupted by sirens and spotlights. The conversation about what happens to people who transport monsters without knowing what they're carrying, without understanding that some cargo remains dangerous long after the container is opened, that some things can't be delivered because they never truly leave. They just wait, patient and hungry, until the time is right to complete the journey and claim what was promised, freedom and revenge and the soul of the driver who almost let them out and then didn't. who failed the test and earned the eternal attention of something that never forgets and never forgives and never, ever stops hunting.